Hi, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Chaos. And as the intro said, I'm your host, Gary Monti. And today we are lucky enough to have Urko Woods to speak with, the founder of Reveal Growth Consultants. And he uses a fascinating methodology, and I'm sure everybody's heard of this, called jobs to be done. The short version is Urko helps business to business companies grow their revenue. And he works with those leaders in terms of innovation and growth. And now the catch is in a predictable manner. So, when you watch movies, you think, oh, growth is just this wildness. And, the mad scientist stays in his lab and he gets his brainstorm and at 2 a.m, runs out to the floor and says, oh, we have to do things this way. No, Urko actually works with people to make their growth predictable and also to sustain value and profitability along with that predictability. And Urko, how did I do with that? Was that okay?
Very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Good.
so we'll pick it up from there. And why don't we just start with, how did you I never even heard of this until I had met you several years ago. So can you talk about how you got into jobs to be done?
Yes, that's actually a comment I hear a lot, is that's not the kind of thing you can prepare in college. That's not a major you can take. But back in the late 90s, just a real quick storyline, and the early 2000s, I was working at a strategy consulting firm doing a lot of voice of the customer research, or VOC. Okay. And, at the time, it was considered the best practice for identifying customers' unmet needs to guide the creation of new and improved offerings. Mm-hmm. And after applying it to a lot of different businesses and situations, I recognized that while it was relatively effective at helping uncover or discover opportunities for improving current products and services, so it's pretty good at discovering opportunities to improve current products and services, it was not nearly as effective for discovering opportunities for new products and services. Oh. I had a client at the time, that was the job, the exercise was to find new products in new markets. And the reason that VOC was limited is because the whole methodology was focused on getting customer feedback on the current product or service. So if you don't have a current product or service, you can see the whole methodology is definitely going to be challenged. And so I was trying to figure out, how do I deal with this, when I read an article in the Harvard Business Review that's about 2003 by Tony Ulwick, the CEO and founder of Stratagen, in which he just nailed the problem. He really helped me understand it better. I was still kind of trying to figure out what's not working here. This isn't really where we need to go. And he also offered a very compelling, different approach that does make innovation predictable. So looking back, it wasn't known as jobs to be done, but he really introduced a precursor to jobs to be done in that article. It was so compelling. I read it and reread it and studied the approach, and I realized that if I wanted to continue being an innovation growth strategy consultant, I was independent at that time, that I really needed to learn about this and wanted to work with Tony and the team and be a part of it. And fortunately, the timing was right. The second time around in 2005, when I reached out, and we hit it off. I worked there till 2012, the year that I started Reveal Growth Consultants. And so now we work with business to business, mostly smaller, mid-sized B2B companies, revenue growth leaders, to make innovation and growth predictable. And that's how we got here.
If I can ask a question, because you said, sure, VOC, voice of the customer. And I remember way back when I took quality courses, that has more of a feedback approach, or the spirit of it is more feedback. And here you're talking about predictability, not just ensuring that the current product's okay. How can we take the company into the future in a profitable manner? That's what I'm hearing from you.
Well, let me clarify that a little bit. I haven't said enough to really make that clear. The feedback from customers is essential. I mean, when you think about Drucker's great line that the purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer, I mean, there is nothing more central. Good. Yeah, he is so good. There is nothing more central to any organization, a business, for-profit business in particular, than understanding your customer. And that means their needs, which are unmet, is where the opportunities lie. So we're still talking about capturing customers' unmet needs. But the limitations of VOC were restrictive in preventing certain kinds of projects, particularly when you're tied to the current product or service. So the beauty of Jobs to Be Done is this is the great insight. This is probably the breakthrough that Tony, I mean, there are a number of things that make this so effective, but one of the great things that he recognized is going back to that quote you may have heard from the late great Harvard Business School professor Theodore Levitt, that people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole.
Yes.
So that's a really foundational touchstone for all that we do. And the reason it's so important is because it makes it clear that the solution is separate and distinct from the need. So at a high level, the need is to make a whole. There are other lower level needs: how do you get it done, how to minimize the time, make sure it doesn't go off track, the things like that we call criteria for success that we also captured. But at a high level, it's the job of making a whole. And that's different from the drill. The solution could be a pick, a punch, a laser, some yet to be invented tool, but that's always going to be a separate and distinct thing. It's not what people want. So people don't buy vitamins because they want vitamins. They want to remain healthy or improve their health. And CFOs, I should say, CFOs don't want to hire accountants. They want to have somebody reassure them that their financial statements are fair, and outsiders, third parties at the financial, or to reduce their tax liability. So nobody wants to hire my products or yours. They want to get something done. And if we can help them get that job done or those jobs done better than their alternatives, their competitive options, then those customers are going to be more likely to buy from us. So the predictability is that we know if we can help them get their jobs done better, they will want what we have to offer. That's where the predictability comes in.
Okay, if I hear you correctly, if I go into my project archives, there's a list of problems that are major and recur frequently. And one of them is engineers and scientists will jump to the design spec and they'll jump to the design test, and they've not checked in to see what does the customer actually need. And then they get aggravated with the customer saying, well, look, we met the design test. Well, yeah, but you didn't meet the customer test. And then,
Oh boy. Yeah, very common. I mean, the key to successful innovation is to shift our focus away from what we know how to do and generating ideas to helping our target customers get their jobs done. Most people think innovation starts with an idea, and it's about generating a lot of ideas because eventually one of them will be a good idea. I have a very different perspective, and that's sort of like getting a lot of at-bats with your eyes blindfolded, because we do know the number one cause for new product failure is misunderstanding the customer's needs. So that's essentially having a blindfold on. You can't see the target. So instead of using, let's say, a baseball metaphor of get a lot of at-bats because maybe you'll get a hit, I think archery is a better metaphor. Ready, aim, and then fire. So aim means first discover the target customer's unmet needs with precision. So you know exactly what they're trying to accomplish and what you have to do to help them. And then generate ideas. Those are the arrows. And then suggest, hey, we have a better way to help you do X.
One of the things we had talked about before then is, and maybe this is segueing, well, let's just jump into it.
Sure.
So how do you define innovation? Because what I'm thinking of, I just picture this big boiling pot with all these people inside it trying to figure out what the hell to do. So how do you find that innovation path? What is innovation?
Harry, that is a great question. And one of the things I do early on with every client is define 7 key terms, because these concepts, innovation, a customer need, an unmet need, an opportunity, a market segment, and creativity, I think those are the ones. They all are our conceptual tools. If you're going to make innovation predictable, you must be aligned with accurate definitions of what each of those are. And frankly, that's not the case. It's amazing how much disagreement there is within management teams about those words I just mentioned. I like to give the example. It's like an attorney trying to prosecute a negligence case. where nobody agrees on what negligence is. In reality, at least I think it may be a state by state thing. There are like 5 elements of negligence that must be proved for the verdict to be it was negligence. So that's the kind of clarity we need too. It's amazing that companies are trying to prosecute innovation, if you will, with their team when they all have different ideas about what is innovation. So thank you for asking. It's a good setup. I like this definition. We use this definition because it not only defines it, there are a lot of good definitions for a definition, but it also says how to execute it, which is really the big problem. So we say innovation is first discovering the target customer's unmet needs, and then generating ideas to address them. And that sequencing is critical. It's just like I alluded to earlier. It's sort of like the doctor first diagnose, then prescribe the treatment plan. That's what makes it predictable.
Oh, so if we go back to the drill metaphor that you were talking about,
yes,
they focused on the hole, not on the drill, because it may turn out there's a laser that comes out that actually is much better than a drill. So stop trying to make the perfect drill.
Exactly. And that was the problem with VOC. All the feedback from customers was tied to the drill. So if somebody wanted to come up with an innovation, the feedback they would say is, well, the drill, the power would go up and down and I'd get stuck. And you're in little minutia. There's no opportunity for breakthrough because you're tied to the same platform or product and you're just trying to improve a few features. But when you capture the need statement totally independent of any solution language, like simply make a hole, and all of the criteria statements that we captured too, like minimize the time it takes to execute something. There's no mention of any solutions ever in good need statements as part of jobs to be done theory. So the client, the company is not constrained to the current products and services. So there's a much greater likelihood of breakthrough.
Wow. What came to mind as you were talking is the cell phone industry, because cell phones started out analog. I mean, there was a market leader. In fact, they pretty much had the world in their pocket when it came to analog. And when digital, I know this because I was consulting, I was teaching with them. When digital came along, it's like, well, we're the best in analog, so why should we bother with digital? And the fact of the matter is, you can carry, I think, 10 to 30 voices digitally over one analog frequency. For that same frequency, you can carry, I think, 10 to 20 more voices. And they had to sell themselves because they got
Nokia. Are you talking about Nokia?
What's that?
Are you talking about the company Nokia? Is that, I think I'm saying it properly.
Yeah, well, Nokia, it was Motorola was they were the world leader in Six Sigma with analog, and they had like 90% of the analog market. And then what happened, Nokia stayed focused on, well, we're not in analog, we're in communications. And it turns out if you use digital,
they got disrupted themselves a few years later.
Right.
And the same, and that actually, I don't know if you're familiar, I probably don't want to open up Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation theory, but that's all explained very well. Simply put, it's if you're focused on a profitable set of customers, it's very easy for a new entrant to come in and address people who either couldn't get into the market because of wealth or expertise or some barrier, and serve those undesirable customers because they're not profitable for that established company. But the technology improves dramatically over time and suddenly starts taking over the market and the disruption occurs. And it's off the radar and rejected initially by the market leaders. Just like you're saying, Kodak, same thing, Nokia, same thing.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, with innovation, first you have to have a clear understanding of the customer's needs. That clarity would be the word that I would use to summarize everything you were talking about. What's the customer's needs? Can we say clearly what it is we intend to do? But can we tie it back to that customer need to make sure we're meeting the need, not just creating some technical whatever?
Yes. Or may I say it a little even differently? Don't even waste any time on idea generation until after you have identified. So there are 3 simple steps in the way that we do it at a high level.
Okay.
First, discover the target customer's unmet needs because they're opportunities. They're important unsatisfied needs. And opportunity is an important unsatisfied need. The more important, less satisfied a need is, the greater the opportunity. So we can, if we also do the survey for the client, which sometimes they want, sometimes they don't, we can identify and rank the opportunities in the market with statistical validity, which is a great resource allocation tool. It gives a lot of confidence to a team, and they can justify it to the board that, hey, these were the top opportunities, we're going after them. But anyway, first, whether it's qualitative interviews only or with statistical surveys that identify the biggest opportunities. Either way, the first step is identify the target customers' unmet needs because there are opportunities for innovation and growth. Step two, take those in with the client team and evaluate them for how attractive they are to pursue for new value creation. They're generally 6 or 7 criteria that I use, like strategic fit, time to market, relative advantage, and maybe there's some, unique thing for that company that they add. But it's a way to evaluate and select those that are most attractive, really based on can the firm address the opportunity and win in the market. That's kind of the bottom line. So they have a short list. There are all these different opportunities, but then there's a short list of these are the ones that we feel we can really address effectively and win in the marketplace with our relative advantage.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So is innovation the same as new product development, or how do they fit together? Maybe that's a better way to ask the question.
Well, it is a great question. I would say that innovation is a lot broader. It's a lot broader than new product. Obviously, there can be all kinds of innovation. There can be scientific, there can be pharmaceutical, there can be operational innovation, there can be Salesforce innovation. I mean, innovation, a good definition for innovation in general might be something new that creates value. So new products is a very small piece of that. The reason I liked the definition I gave you is because that's where we're focused to create value for our customers. They're looking to create value for their customers. So that's why I say for us, for what our clients are trying to do, which is create new value and differentiate and drive growth. That's what we're doing through innovation. That's why I say innovation is the process of discovering the target customer's unmet needs and then generating ideas. So innovation is much broader and bigger. And even here, I sometimes don't like to use the term, even when I'm talking with clients, prospective clients, I'm reluctant to use the language of we help them to create new and improve products and services, because as we were talking about a minute ago, one of the beauties of the jobs we've done process is you're not tied to the current solutions. So I just mentioned the second step a moment ago of once you have those opportunities identified, evaluate them and select those that are most attractive. Well, the opportunities are going to be stated in need statements without any reference to any current product or service. So you can see that, hey, maybe we should acquire the capabilities to address that because that's a big need. Nobody's doing it. If we can acquire a company, we can immediately address it and gain share. That's what one client did in an accounting firm. They bought a cybersecurity firm because they noticed their CFOs and COs were really concerned about that. It's not their skill, but it came as a big opportunity. Same with seasonal talent acquisition. A lot of bigger companies want to get accountants for the tax season. So they entered into a joint venture to make sure they could provide that. So they were creating this one-stop shop, even though it wasn't accounting per se. It was things that their clients were trying to get done that were related to what they do. So that's the beauty of this process. You get to sit in the strategic position and decide, is this something we want to build internally? And that would go into brainstorming, that ideation. Is it something we want to acquire or joint venture? Or is it something we want to leave aside because somebody else, an accounting firm is a person-to-person platform generally. Mm-hmm. There are online competitors. And some of the top opportunities we recognize in going through that step 2 of evaluating the opportunities, we recognize that there were people like Intuit, I should say firms like Intuit who would kill them. They might get in there and be able to, even get some coding and do some digital solution, but they're not experts at that. So let it go. There were also tax attorneys who were experts at some things. Let it go. So this is where that step of evaluating the opportunities and selecting those that are most attractive based on their relative strengths. If you think about it, virtually every winning product and new market and growth strategy is formulated by addressing a known big unmet need in the market with the firm's relative strengths. And that's exactly what we're doing in a systematic fashion here. By first discovering the unmet needs, then determining which are attractive to pursue. And then step 3, Gary, this is where most people start. They start with brainstorming, generating ideas. No, we've eliminated all those needs that are currently already satisfied. That's a waste of time. You're not going to get any differentiation if you're addressing a need that somebody else is already addressing well in the marketplace. We're eliminating from the brainstorming all of those needs that are not important. Who cares about it if it's unimportant? And we're eliminating all of those that we call phantom needs that often people inside the firm, the engineers, think, hey, this is a problem and we can address it this way. When you go out and talk to customers, they say, what? That's not I never even thought about that. It's not an issue for us. So we're in that fine space of only the important unsatisfied needs. And so a good idea must address one of those highly attractive opportunities that's important and unsatisfied. So now the team goes into ideation with great clarity and confidence about where to focus and what to do, because the needs tell you what to do. So they have clarity and confidence about where to focus and what to do to create those winning new offerings, whatever it may be, product, services, new or improved, or acquisitions.
Let me share heartburn. A friend of mine's a product manager, and product management's like the flavor of the month. It used to be project management and it was agility. Now product management is the flavor of the month. And one of the problems that occurs in my mind, I was framing what I wanted to say in terms of what you said. Innovation would be the big umbrella, and product management and product development would be under that umbrella, so to speak. And there should always be an eye on the need of the customer. And one of the things that seems to occur is companies will pick up product, companies frequently look for the white knight. What's the next thing we can get? And by God, if we just hire a person with a PhD in that, all our problems are over, and we'll be able to do buybacks on stock and blah, blah, blah. But what happens is, like you were saying, the engineers will want to solve a problem. They just like working on that kind of problem. It looks like product management will be put ahead of innovation. And then the company can get caught up in the mudflaps and fur dice that they're going to hang on the product. But the goal, and as you said repeatedly, is to stay with the innovation. Where are we with the customer, and where are we with the customer's needs? And what can happen is, and I'm saying all this because I really want to hear, you have more experience with this than I do. The product manager, they start turning the volume down on the product manager because the company wants to, well, let's build something we can make smoothly and we can deliver a lot, and we'll get sales to get out there and push this. And then the product manager, who's there to represent the innovation, they put a dimmer switch on him or her, and they just keep on turning the dimmer switch down because they want to get focused on making something that we can push out the door. Are you familiar? You're nodding your head, so I assume you have some familiarity.
Well, I'm listening. I haven't worked with, I come from the market research ends, not the product development
Oh, okay.
end. I'm not that familiar with some of those internal dynamics. I see a lot of, I thought you were going to be talking about, how management and the team rank and fund projects.
Oh, yes.
Very contentious thing often.
That's what keeps me in business.
That I'm more familiar with.
Okay. That's in the same line. Let's do the familiar might be where I would lump all that.
Yeah. Well, so I guess with a connection for me with that is that you see a lot of politicking in company because there is no objective metric from the customer. It should be from the customer and the company. I mean, the company has its own metrics for a winning product, should do these things. It must be this size. It must be able to generate this amount. That's appropriate. But a key is the number one, I would say, is it relevant to the customer? And most companies, because they don't know jobs to be done, they don't have an objective metric to evaluate really concepts. You want to do this. First of all, you only want to look at those. You only want to generate ideas on those needs that are important and satisfied to the customer. But let's say there's some that have been grandfathered in, and before you did that, you can evaluate all of those in the pipeline for, well, how effectively does this stack up against these top 15 needs or whatever you may have found in the research. And you can rate, I don't want a 1 to 5 scale, well, we think extremely satisfies that need, 5, 1, not at all. And you can rate each of the features of the new project according to how well it gets those needs met. So you can get a very objective customer-based decision. Now, maybe that's not the end of the story. I generally want to use those things for discussion purposes, and let people weigh in and say, well, here's why I think this is underrepresented, and people are evaluating it poorly for this reason. We still haven't even thought it, we haven't made it, we're thinking it's this, it could be that. There are all kinds of things that come out of the discussion. So it's a great starting point for the discussion. But my point is, it's a objective metric for the management team to say, even though the CEO thinks this is a great idea,
Yes.
These metrics, it doesn't measure up. There are 3 other projects that do better, and we don't have money to fund all of them. So we can go to the CEO and say, here's why we don't recommend this one.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned validating all this with market research, et cetera. That sounds rather vague and amorphous, but yet you are disciplined, and your tone is that there's a disciplined way to do this. So how does a company do that in terms of innovation? How do they find out what the market wants?
Great question. And you're gonna have to stop me if I get in the weeds too much. This is some of the methodology. I'm happy to talk about it. First, let me see at a high level for the takeaway for anybody tomorrow. Let me do it at the high level, and then we can drop into it a little deeper.
Okay.
At a high level, if you're a CEO listening, and you're thinking, well, how can we create some new products? Some simple things that they can do without a whole lot of knowledge about jobs to be done, even just remembering that when you talk to customers, the kind of inputs you want to get are what they're trying to accomplish. So we call it jobs to be done. What are the jobs they're trying to get done with your product or service, or maybe that you could help them get done if it's something new. So you always want to, like Covey said, keep the end in mind. You want to keep the customer's end in mind. That's the beginning of highly effective people. It's like the second habit. First habit for Covey was be proactive. So be proactive, go out and talk to some of your customers. Second habit, keep the end in mind. Well, since you're helping them, find out what their end in mind is, their ends in mind. And then third is focus on the highly important. I think that is the way I remember. It's been a while. And that's exactly what we're doing here too. So the important unsatisfied needs are the best opportunities for innovation and growth. So this is where it takes some skill to know what inputs to capture and how to get them. A lot of people are on board. Everybody says they're customer focused, but because I get called in after somebody else, often internally, has gotten customer statements and they're unactionable, or actually will mislead and will lead to failure, I get hired because it's not clear what to get when you go out and talk to a customer. Just like a doctor makes the diagnosis, anybody can talk to a patient, but the doctor knows what exactly to ask, what tests to run in order to get that accurate diagnosis. And then the treatment plan is pretty easy once you do that. It's the same thing with innovation and product development.
Yeah, and you had mentioned politics, because innovation may go in a direction. Let's go to the flip from analog to digital. Well, then the director of all those analog engineers is wondering, oh, am I going to keep my VP position? What's going to happen here?
Yes.
And then that just creates a huge mess for everybody.
Well, there's no getting around that human problem. Well, let me say it a little differently. That human problem is always going to be with us. There is a way to get around it.
Okay, I'm listening.
And this is not something new to me, but maybe you're familiar with it. But there's good research that shows, and it actually comes out of where I'm familiar with it, is around Christensen's disruptive innovation that I briefly touched on a minute ago. And that is, if you are aware that there's some new technologies that are emerging, but they're not profitable for your current business to go after, like Motorola, you gave the example, then it's really important for senior leadership, CEO, to start a new function offsite with different incentives, different roles.
I love it.
Their job is to disrupt the current business model, because either you're going to do it or somebody else is going to do it, particularly if you've seen it already starting in the marketplace. And because the reasons you just said, the politicking, it's impossible for that person who's, in senior leadership, who's getting rich and having a great time with all the skills he's mastered, she or she has mastered in their role. It's not humanly possible to expect them to just say, screw that. We're going to actually kill our market and start something else. It's just not reasonable. Let me put it that way. So that's why you need to create the right structure offsite, different culture, different incentives with different mission. And then you're not faced with that internal politicking challenge, at least nearly as much.
For the listener, to support what Urko's talking about, because you might think he's being academic and this is pie in the sky and he really doesn't understand managing the purse strings. The latest statistic I saw is the average company only lasts 12 years now. It either disappears, it partners with another company, or it flat out gets bought out. And it was back in the 70s, the average company lasted 30 to 50 years. And so what's happening is that life expectancy is getting shorter. Now, let's make things more complex. And within those 12 years of survivability, the company will have to reinvent itself at least 3 times. For the
Yes.
listener that thinks that Urko, like, where am I going to get the money to have an offsite group or a separate group or whatever? I would encourage you to find it. And actually, I have an example of that. I used to be a big Palm user. Does anybody remember PDAs and
Oh,
Palm?
sure. Yeah.
And the way Palm went out of business was when they surged and just made more money than they knew what to do with, instead of moving that money back into innovation, the shareholders said, we want that. And so they took those huge profits and they pissed it away in dividends. I'm sorry to say it that way. And then what happened is Microsoft just came in and just ate them alive. And I know this because it was in USA Today. The president of Palm at the time, he said, I made a mistake. I focused on shareholder value. I did not focus on what's it going to take for Palm to continue. So,
ouch.
Okay, yeah. So for those of you that think maybe Urko's talking pie in the sky, no, Urko, you sound very grounded to me as far as you making that commitment to keep on looking. And if I heard you correctly, if the politics are bad enough in the company, make a separate group and just have them divorced for the time so that they can have a clean sheet of paper to start the innovative process.
I gave the ideal situation for a smaller business that doesn't have those resources. I mean, simply hiring somebody, putting them in a different part of the company, reporting to somebody else, make as much of it as you can. Just being aware that the current culture will want to spit it out. So you need to just protect them.
Well stated. We've always done it this way. The overlap in our businesses is fascinating. And another story I have that I like a lot is Kelly Johnson with the Skunk Works at Lockheed. They had a period. Kelly Johnson had a couple rules. One is he had an open door policy, and you could come in and share the problem. But the thing is, you had to interview everyone else involved in the problem and give voice to the other guy or other girls. So you had to represent the guy you're pissed off, the guy you're mad at. You had to represent him as well as you represented yourself.
Great idea.
Yeah. And the other thing is the designers and the machinists could be no further than 1 floor apart for sanity. And then the other thing he did was the Skunk Works was kept separate from Lockheed Manufacturing. They were walled off. They were in their own building. They were totally separate from the other people.
Yes, excellent.
So it can be done. And to repeat what you just said, if you can hire somebody that you think has the spirit to chase the innovation properly, you might only need that one person and put them in a position where they can thrive. If I do some active listening with what you were saying, is that correct?
Yes. Matter of fact, I worked for an energy company during deregulation, and they recognized they were now going to compete, after years of being regulated, and they hired a very highly skilled, perhaps could have been the CEO. He had a lot of authority, very good manager, very smart guy who understood the industry and the dynamics and the need for creating new products and services. And they didn't have him on a different site, but he was clearly given freedom and was outside of the normal hierarchy and culture because they needed him to make this new account management model. Like a lot of business to business, 20% of the 20% of the customers are delivering 80% of the revenue. So it was, he had to figure out a way, and I was there with part of a team to help create a strategic account management program, and I led the new products part of that. So it wasn't nearly as extravagant as what I described. That was just kind of an ideal for a large company.
So in your background, are you a technician or are you a marketing person or are you?
Yeah, no, I'm a marketing person. Yeah. I have a highly easily utilized philosophy degree from undergraduate school, and I have a MBA in marketing, and I have a master's in applied psych, which has also come in handy. Actually, all three of those have been very helpful in different ways.
So when you're working with a client, because we had talked about politics, I personally believe, I tell my clients, everything is simple if you can find the right vantage point. And the challenge is having the courage and the humility to find the right vantage point, because it may be different than what you want, and it may be different than what you're afraid of. When you're working with your clients, what do you do to help them keep their eye on the prize, so to speak, to keep them focused on innovation?
Yeah, good question. Well, they're in agreement with me. We partner together because there's agreement about some growth objective. So in part of the discovery process, that's the upfront questions and discovering what exactly is going on in the situation, what are they trying to accomplish, what kind of impact do they want, all that stuff. Will be aligned they want to go after a certain target customer who's trying to get a certain thing done, typically. There are three real jobs beyond lenses, but I'll just stick to that one for now. So we're aligned in what we're trying to accomplish. That is to uncover the needs of that target customer who's trying to get this job done with their product or service. So the needs, I talk about making a hole is the job, but let's say carpenters who use drills, they have other metrics for success. So they know that drill or some yet to be invented tool or some new tools invented, they'll evaluate that new instrument, that new tool, based on how well it helps them get the job done. And then they have criteria for success for each of the steps they have to go through to make that whole. So it may mean make a measurement to get the right location. So that may be independent of the product, so that may not be affected. But maybe a part of this, one of the things you see in innovation is the more of the total job the product can help the customer accomplish, the better. Because people don't like pulling different hodgepodge solutions for one little step in the larger job of making the whole. So if the same, let's say a laser can say, bing, there, located, you put in the coordinates, boom, there it is on the wall. That's pretty attractive. You don't have to get out your tape measure or whatever. So the steps they have to go through to make the whole and the criteria for success navigating each step are sort of the atomic level, the most actionable level of need. So there are three different kinds of needs often, and depending again on the kind of project, their objectives, their situation. But so it's not just, okay, how can we improve? How can we make it easier for carpenters who are making residential homes to make holes? It's, well, what are the steps they have to go through? We'd find that out in the research. And how do they measure success? And it's typically eliminating a lot of bad stuff that can happen. So things like, this is what Strategy has done such a great job of pioneering, like minimizing the likelihood of something happening, like minimize the likelihood of drilling in the wrong location or making the hole in the wrong location, minimize the likelihood of getting injured, minimize the likelihood of the drill bit breaking. So there are all these things that at different steps, they can say, this is where it's not true. The customers cannot tell us what they want. They can tell us what they want if we're asking what they want to accomplish or avoid. Where people have gotten caught up with the old Henry Ford statement that if you'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, and people can't tell us what they want. That's only half true. It's only half true. It's only true if you're talking about the solution. But that's like the patient asking the patient to come up with the treatment. They can't say that. Neither can customers tell the solution provider what the right product solution is. It's not their job. It's not their role and responsibilities. So the suppliers have to take responsibility for being the expert in the solution. The customers are the expert and authority when it comes to, well, what exactly should the solution be doing? What should it enable the customer to get done?
You remind me of what one of my mentors taught me years ago. He said, do not confuse requirements with needs.
Very good. Yes. So in other words, the need is the customer's need, and the requirement is the engineer's, maybe accurate, inaccurate, meaningful, or unmeaningful product.
Bob, he taught me, he said, if you're going to have a requirements meeting with the customer, you want to do two lists. You want to list the needs and you want to list the requirements. And literally, you want to get a pencil, have a meeting, and draw a line between the needs and the requirements, because you might find there's either requirements missing or there's requirements that don't connect to a need at all. He always said, your job, the more you're a leader, the more you need to keep things simple and keep your focus on the goal. But anyway, avoid confusing needs with requirements.
Love that.
Uh,
Yes.
okay, so say someone's interested in doing what you do. What do you hold yourself to? You're coming up to the client's door and you're going to go in and you're going to talk with them. What are your responsibilities in preparing to talk with clients about innovation and jobs to be done? What do you hold yourself to?
What do I hold myself to? You mean in terms of what topics do I introduce and discuss with a new
Well, it's like
client?
you're showing up as a navigator, and you're going to show them how to
Yes.
use a compass and how to use a map, etc.
Yeah, I like calling myself an innovation guide. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do I do it? How do I get started? Is that sort of what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. So, again, it really is all about them. I mean, I'm here to support them. So I don't, they probably have read something or they viewed something. And so they've approached me if that's how the relationship occurred, because they know about me and jobs to be done. And so they're thinking, well, we're getting displaced by some new competition. So most of my clients, there's a threat. Their sales have dropped.
Yeah.
There are new competitors. They're not growing as quickly as they used to. They're competing on price more now. They're all clear they must do something to drive growth. And innovation is a great way to do that. So they're approaching me with the understanding that, hey, we don't have the internal resources to do this. We know that we need to differentiate. Sometimes that's the word they use. And that's really what innovation is intended to do. It's to create new value that's differentiated, all in the eyes of the customer, of course. And of course, that the client can capture some of the value in that creation. But so we'll have to get clear about what it is they're trying to accomplish. That's probably the first thing.
Do you ever get pushback
About our approach?
Well, when I look at what I do in change, to boil it down, most of my clients want the benefit of the change without changing. So I don't know if that maps over into innovation where you get pushback.
Well, it's probably a little different in the regard. I'm not doing change management per se.
Right.
Matter of fact, we had a conversation about who's included not too long ago in the decision to move forward. And of course, it's not my decision, but I tell my clients, whoever you think is important to be there, if they're part of the leadership team, but not charged with this responsibility, you don't think it's necessary, then I keep it small so we can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then at kickoff, everybody who's involved, who's going to be using the data or has a stake in the outcome and the results, should be there, because we want them to, like that scrum master, we want every dissenting view to come out at that kickoff.
Okay.
So that we don't find it at the end of the project when we've identified the needs and somebody says, well, I don't understand this methodology. This isn't what I'm used to. But so we don't really do a lot of change management per se, as long as the team is on board with our methodology. Now, the methodology is quite unusual and sometimes difficult for people because it's so different. It's so novel. They're accustomed to doing other things. Maybe the ideas first approach or capturing customer needs in verbatim from customers, which is what VOC used to do. But it's really not a change management issue to create a winning new product. There's a team that is charged to do that typically. And we're giving them clarity about where to focus and what to do with their resources. And then they run with it and they put it into their stage gate if they have a stage gate new product development process. We usually hand it off at the concept stage. So they have concept boards about the new ideas, and then they take them into evaluate for, entry into the stage gate.
Yeah, I think that's where our respective professions complement each other, because the falderall that would be around switching to an innovative frame of mind, that's a lot of the work that I do.
Well,
I mean,
can I offer some other thoughts on that? I mean, it's a little
go ahead.
different so there is a way to use jobs to be done to create a culture of innovation.
Okay.
And this is something I'm interested in doing for clients more, just because I think it would have a lot of value. And so there are 4 basic parts to this. I mentioned the importance of educating people about those 7 key words and what jobs to be done is. So I do that at kickoff. I do that a lot for every project. I have to do that. And I have to get everybody involved to agree that these are good definitions for innovation, for an opportunity, for a market, et cetera, so that we're all aligned and we're all rowing together. So that's the first thing. And that can be done for all employees, because that will help create a culture of innovation when they recognize nobody cares about their output, their deliverable or their product. Everybody is seeking to get something done. And if all the employees know that, they will be better employees. They will be more innovative. So training for everybody. Then I guess another way to look at it is everybody's got their own internal customer. Everybody's got a customer. Some are external, some are internal. It's a really great thing to go to the person that uses your work. Maybe it's a spreadsheet you deliver every Friday, whatever it is. Go to the people or the key person and ask them, what are you trying to accomplish with my output? And find out what makes it difficult, challenging, or frustrating, and how it might be better. That will create new value. That will align your work with theirs. It's kind of sad to think how many companies have been operating for decades, and some people don't even talk. And the people that get the reports are discouraged because
I run into that all the time.
It's not meeting their needs because nobody's having these conversations.
Right.
So, everybody's got a customer. Go and do the same thing that I do for their external customers, for the employees and their internal customers. And then I guess the third thing would be make sure that everybody models the sequencing here. You may remember in my definition, first discover the target customer's unmet needs and then generate solutions to address them. That's problem resolution 101. But human nature is to jump to solutions. And in meetings,
yes,
that happens all the time. It's like, okay, we're here to talk about that new account. Hey, I think we need to do X. And you haven't even defined the problem yet. There's a discipline that you can introduce to the company by just enforcing, before you do anything at the beginning of a meeting, make sure there's a clear definition of the problem before you engage in the meeting.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And the last thing, people do think in terms of ideas naturally. And it's good to encourage employees, particularly on the front line, anywhere. You want employees to be engaged and say, hey, I think there's a better way to do X, either for an internal operational thing or for the customer. So you want to encourage those and have a place to receive those and evaluate those ideas. But you can put some rigor on them. A lot of those things don't work very well, and they get overwhelmed with a lot of bad ideas, and people and the employees recognize that management isn't serious and they don't do anything, and it turns out to be kind of a waste of time, at least I hear from people. One way to prevent that is to apply some of the jobs thinking to this. So when people are submitting an idea, they are instructed, who is the target customer? What's the job that they're trying to get done?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they struggling in that job? What's the opportunity for value creation? What's your idea going to do that will mitigate or improve that, create new value? How do you know that this is a problem? What's your evidence? Not just you were sitting around, but what's your evidence? And what's your evidence that it's a broad problem? So the first one is how deep, how do you know it's really important and satisfying when I say, what's the evidence? And then how broad? So it's sort of how deep and how broad. What's the evidence for both of those? How many people in the target market really would be experiencing this? Why do you believe that? Or is this a one-off thing? So the person who's generating the idea has some skin to do that. And often they'll be able to do it. They're in the arena and they can write that down pretty quickly. But that saves an enormous amount of time for that poor schlum who's in the back office trying to evaluate these ideas. Now he knows, or he can go and talk to that person and say, tell me some more about this, and get very quickly to whether this is a good idea or not.
For the listener, I did a series of podcasts on a book called Flow. I actually went through every chapter, and you can look for Flow in the categories on the podcast page. And what the authors recommended there is they stopped using emails and texts, and they find a long haul that they just put butcher paper up on. And everybody from the president of the company down to the janitor, they all get their own chart, and they put up what they think is important on Post-its, and they put it up on the chart. So everybody in the company can read what, including the president, which, in some places like, well, you can't eat in the executive dining room, that kind of BS. No, with this flow mentality, what you're talking about, they actually encourage people everything goes on, it goes up on their chart. It put it on a post-it, put it on your chart. Anybody can read anybody's chart anytime. And that spontaneously stimulates conversation as to both reinforcement and conflict. And then people organically, spontaneously start talking to each other because the specifics you're referring to as viewed by a given individual, whether it's the janitor, an accountant, or the president themselves, well, it's all there on their post-its. So anyway, for the listener, I encourage you, it's a good method, listen to the podcast. So in other words, avoid thinking what Urko's talking about is pie in the sky. It can be done. And it's not a burden like, oh my God, I got 20 tasks. Now I got to do this stuff that Urko's talking about, making sure I'm transparent with everybody else. No, it doesn't have to be that way. It actually can be less stressful and more organic if you just use the method I was talking about to open up. Tell me about, you've mentioned this before, the hidden markets that can be discovered in using the marketing aspect of jobs to be done. Can you expand on that? I find that kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful part of the process if you know how to create the need statements so they're accurate and unambiguous, so they can go into a survey. So this is where, you have to, I was mentioning, you have to know what inputs to get and how to get them. You have to know how to craft them in a format that's unambiguous and accurate. It's been validated by the customer, so they can go into a survey to a representative sample of the target customer population. And every one of those need statements is rated for how important is it to you that you're able to do X, and how satisfied are you with your ability to do X. So you're getting those two ratings on a 1 to 5 scale. So you might have 5 is extremely important and 2 is not very well satisfied. So that you're getting different ratings for each, importance and satisfaction. That's an opportunity because it's highly important and not well satisfied. So that's what I was alluding to earlier. You can identify and rank all of the opportunities in the marketplace with statistical validity. But that's at the total market level, what I'm just saying. If you can get enough, and again, for some companies, for B2B in particular, it can be difficult to get at least 30 people, target customers in a cell. But if you can get, say, 150 or 180, so you can do segmentation.
Yeah.
So you have like a 3 or 4 segment solution. That means that you can break down that, let's say 180, into at least 3 or 4 segments that are discretely different. And what we're doing when it comes to jobs-based segmentation or criterion-based is we're looking at and aggregating these. And I have a statistician to do this. Believe me, I don't do this. I have a former Battelle statistician that helps me with this. We figured this out. But you're finding the clusters of customers who share the same valuing or opportunities in the marketplace. So you may find that although they're all similar, like let's take an accounting firm that I mentioned, their target customers are CFOs and CEOs, but you may find if you were to do the segmentation that it's actually CFOs who are in privately held companies and are responsible for creating this succession plan, all the financial issues in succession planning, the leadership planning. That responsibility may be unique for those CFOs. And there's actually a group that fit that. So that's a market niche or a segment. And because of their situational difference, they value certain jobs or certain criterion for success differently. And that's, so we would clump them together based on what they're trying to accomplish. So this goes back to the predictive nature of a job. And this is why it's so powerful. There are currently everybody in the world practically, and more people are awakening to this method, but most companies do segmentation based on demographics and attributes, age, region.
Right. That's where I thought you were going to go.
Right. We don't do that. Now, that's important for profiling the customer so we can get to them, but we're actually putting them into clusters based on what they share in terms of what they're trying to accomplish and what they value, because everybody values things a little differently. But then you can have those 3 or 4 groups that value that particular set of the total very, very much. So they're very underserved. That's what you're looking for, is a segment of opportunity that's very underserved. They're very important for them because they have these unique conditions, and unsatisfied for them. And maybe it's 25, maybe it's 40% of the market, but in a big market, that's tremendous. And nobody knows about them because nobody's looking at the market based on what they're trying to accomplish. They're all imposing their segmentation based on age or region or
Oh
ethnicity,
God, yes.
which may have nothing to do. Often there's no correlation between that and their behavior. Sometimes there's high correlation. Like, I buy the Wall Street Journal, not because of my age or ethnicity or my profession, but because now there's some correlation that might be valuable, but still you're working in the realm of correlation. You want to be in the realm of causality. That's what JobsBeDone provides. So we know people will buy a product to help them get their job done. And if we can help them, that segment, get their jobs done better than any other option, we're going to win a lot of business in that segment. And that's the hidden market that I was talking about.
Wow, that you just reminded me. Well, there's a two-parter to this question. The first one, well, let me give you my personal experience. It drives me nuts when I have a doctor's visit, and I'm lucky to get my 6 to 15 minutes based on what the insurance company's willing to pay for. And then I get home and I get this survey that's going to take me longer to fill out than the time I got to spend with the doctor. And
Right.
it seems very selfish and very self-serving. It does not sound innovative. In fact, I complained to my wife about this. I said, they're just trying to take their existing method and sharpen it. They're not actually interested in what exactly it is that I need.
Yeah.
Am I making sense when I talk this way? I mean,
Oh, totally. I've gotten those too. I usually don't answer them. I just, they're burdensome. And, I guess I'm a little jaded in that we often pay people to do those things. So
okay, so for the listener who's interested in that, and this is B2B, which is a lot different than B2C, business to consumer, how might a listener approach this then in terms of how do they want to approach their customer base or prospective people they want to participate in a survey? What frame of mind should they use in trying to get this information so that the person that's filling out the survey actually wants to provide, do you have any hints for doing that?
Yes, I do. First, I wouldn't recommend the survey. It's too complicated unless you're hiring a consultant. So forget about the survey per se. I mean, maybe some companies have some internal capabilities, but it's not that the survey expertise isn't there. It's that has to be populated with the right customer needs, formatted in the right structure, or they will be ambiguous and it will throw this. You can't just ask a question and then ask it a little different in the next question and expect the results not to be thrown. So there's a lot to getting the needs, putting them in the right format so they're unambiguous and can be rated accurately with validity. So believe me, there's no way I could be doing this if I didn't have some experience doing it. So I don't encourage anybody to try to do that at home.
Okay.
But they can do other things with their surveys perhaps, but not what I'm doing with capturing the needs and then populating the survey with the needs statements. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they
I was going to ask, so people could retain you just to help. What's a proper survey frame of mind, and how would you implement that survey frame of mind? They actually could. Go ahead.
I don't think surveys are the first step. I think a much better approach is the qualitative interviews. You want to understand first establish who is your target customer, what are they trying to get done with your product, or maybe you're thinking about a new product in a space. So you want to get clear, what are they trying to accomplish? What are the steps if they're buying it to do the steps themselves? What are the steps they have to go through? Sometimes they're hiring you to do the whole thing. And then you want to understand what are the steps that they have to take to consume or to get the value of what you do. So these are different contexts, but let me keep it simple. Who is your target customer? What are they trying to get done? What are the criteria they use to measure success? And where do they struggle? That's the stuff you want to get done. And always capture that with the end in mind. So when people say, well, I really want your product to have this feature because I saw it someplace and you don't have it and it would help me. Okay, you can take a note, but the question you should always ask, you never want to talk when you're doing these interviews. You never want to talk, at least this is my discipline. I have to ask myself if I were in their shoes, if I would stick to this. but you don't want to conflate solution testing development with an open, honest conversation about needs. You're going to screw up the whole objective. So I always promise there's no, first of all, when I'm representing the client, there's no selling. So they have to be clear. There's nothing here about sales, and there's nothing even about solutions. We're strictly talking about what you're trying to accomplish in this space. So I would encourage people, because it gives people the freedom to speak about their needs and not get into evaluating your solutions. Again, that's self-centered. Stick with the customer's discussion about what they want. And then later, you can have a separate conversation when you're ready about, here's some features. Would these work? Would these address some of the things that I heard? Actually, you might want to go back and say, here's what I heard. Is this accurate? And then go back, figure out what some features are. Would this address the features as a third step? And who is the customer? What are they trying to accomplish? How do they measure success? And where do they struggle and why?
Wow.
That's the simple stuff that they want to walk away from those interviews. That's going to be much more helpful generally than surveys that don't penetrate that level of and quality and power of information.
That's that simple vantage point that I said you need to find, and to do a bit of active listening. You want to keep the scope of the interview open, because the moment you talk about solutions, you're closing the scope and introducing bias.
And you're introducing the sales relationship again. You're introducing the supplier's needs.
Yes.
Why do that? That's sort of like a therapist saying, well, by the way, I'm thinking about doing a new intervention technique. Would it be of value to you if I did this? It's like, I'm not here to tell you about new techniques. You asked me for what my problem is. I'm telling you my problem.
That's a good example.
Yeah. So I think protecting that relationship and sticking to, let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish, is the right approach.
Okay. So if people wanted to get a hold of you to talk more about what we're discussing here, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Simple contacts, email Wood, my initials, Wood at revealgrowth.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Urko Wood, Urko. On Facebook under Reveal Growth, the company name. There's a contact page on the website, revealgrowth.com. So any of those contacts would work.
I've learned, every time we talk, I learn a lot more. I always enjoy talking with you because your work is adjacent to mine, and it's another universe, so to speak. So it's kind of this weird combination of, we have a lot in common, but boy, it's really different. Both.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, thank you. It's always fun for me to talk with you. I could have said that too. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so for the listener, you have Urko's contact information. I will have it in the show notes, and I want to remind you, the show notes I put out are pretty comprehensive. So if you want to read more about this, just go to the show notes, and because some people like to listen and read at the same time, etc. And Urko, we're probably going to do another podcast in the future. I just find this absolutely fascinating.
Well, I would enjoy that. Thank you.
So you reach the limits of my understanding, so I've got to learn a bit more about this, but I think you bring a great service
thank you
to your clients.
Thank you. It's been fun talking with you.
Yes. And for the listener, well, it's great serving you, and I look forward to talking with you in a future podcast. Take care.